And that, folks, is INFO605 in a nutshell. As you'll recall, we started with a sort of textual problem statement in plain English, the sort of thing that hopefully anyone could find fairly intelligible. We moved to creating a pictorial entity relationship diagram that modeled that plain English statement in a way that was fairly standard and that another database developer could quickly look at and ascertain what the data to be managed was, the connections between the data, some of the business rules about how many friends per book, how many books per friend, that sort of thing. We created this set of table designs from our conceptual entity relationship diagram, and that's where we specified, that we would have a separate table for the manager's relationship, and it would have such and such foreign keys, and those would point here, and that would allow us to document, that borrows conjoins a particular friend with a particular book with a start date and end date, etc. Once we had those table designs in place, then we could go ahead and actually implement our designs in SQL, structured query language, which is the standard language for communicating with relational databases. We ran a bunch of create table statements to build tables and foreign key relationships between those tables with the references clause that embodied the sorts of things that we had seen in our problem statement, in our ERD, and then in those table designs that we did with the parenthetical notation just in a Word document with those arrows pointing around. We actually built tables that embody those concepts. Then we used insert statements to stuff in data accordingly. We used select statements to read some of that data back out, some fairly complex to show joins between tables. We did a couple of things with update statements to update end dates because we were changing how we decided to manage that end date column. And we also demonstrated the use of views, which is an implementation of the external schema concept. The idea that we can sort of insulate users and other consumers of our database, maybe their applications, whatever they may be, from changes that are going on inside the database, and we can sort of rewicker things under the covers so that when we change things like how we manage the data in a certain column, they don't necessarily need to be any the wiser. As long as we rewicker how the external schema is constructed and the mappings between our tables and the external schema, in this case that meant we rewrote the query behind the view, then these applications don't have to break when we change things. So there it is, folks. Hope it's useful. And as I said, of course, we'll be running through all these concepts in much greater detail as we move through the course. And we will also go over what best practices are. We'll explore each of them in detail, etc. One thing we did not cover here was a concept called normalization. And that's something fairly important that I really couldn't do justice to in this forum. But it's basically a set of rules for determining whether or not your tables are well designed. It's a very important topic, and it's something we'll spend a week on, but it just didn't lend itself to this sort of presentation. So when the time comes, I'll certainly be making a separate video about normalization and how to move through the normalization process to determine whether or not the tables you have defined are well designed and they meet certain quality criteria. All right, folks, as I said, I hope it was useful. Thanks very much for your time, and I will see you soon.